Hello and welcome to Intention Ascension. I'm so excited to be here because I haven't recorded in almost a week now. Or no, not even almost, over a week now. And today I want to talk about letting go of other people's opinions and being able to focus on yourself, know your values, know your worth. And we start to understand our value and our worth when we practice self-awareness. So when I look at self-awareness, I look at our emotions. Our emotions are our teachers, and all of our lessons are inside of our emotions. And emotions are emotion, energy in motion. And when we are able to focus on what is going on inside of us, then we are able to dive a little deeper and figure out what has triggered, because we are now off keel. We are not in our normal state because something has bothered us. Something's triggered a physical reaction inside of us, whether that's your heart racing or your fist clenching, you're palpitating, whatever, your breathing changes, you start sweating, whatever it is, we have a reaction. Maybe you get flushed, you feel like you've done a niacin flush, but it's just your physical reaction to what is going on. And when we can explore our own emotions and dive a little bit deeper to understand where they are coming from, then we can understand how we want to handle the situation that is taking place. So when I say that, what I mean is that sometimes we find ourselves in situations and it's our own fault. And sometimes we react to situations and later find out that we've had an overreaction because we didn't do the proper evaluation. And what we found at the bottom of that evaluation was that it was something that we could have avoided by clear communication or having boundaries with another person. To be able to recognize when we are being triggered and ask ourselves, why did that affect me? Why did that rub me the wrong way? Because there's a saying, if it doesn't apply, let it fly. But when we can't let something fly, then obviously somewhere, somehow it applies. And it's our responsibility. I apologize for my dog. It's our responsibility to go through and evaluate why we can't detach from this situation and what is happening. It's our responsibility to understand our emotions. We don't want to seek approval from others. That doesn't help ever. And that is a huge it is a contradiction to being self-aware. Because if we're not self-aware, then we are going to consistently be doing things that are not in alignment with ourselves. Another thing to look at when it comes to being able to let go of the judgments of others is sometimes they're not judgments, but they're accurate, constructive criticism or feedback, maybe would be a better way of putting it, because we aren't able to absorb the feedback. And often it's because there's some level of truth that's inside of that feedback that we really need to take an honest look at and discover in ourselves why we have a fear of overcoming whatever that is. So as a child, I was constantly told that I talk too much in school. And I don't think that that's a problem now, given what I do and being able to help others and also being on this podcast. I believe that my talking was always, always going to be a part of my future, right? But in class, that wasn't acceptable. And that was one thing that my mom constantly was told by teachers. And I remember I would just, I would just wait for that accusation against me, that was so awful and terrible. But the bottom line is that it was true. I was often talking a lot in class to whoever would listen at any point in time and get my word out when I felt necessary. And it probably wasn't ever actually important. But the thing is that here we are. I'm 34 years old, and I still remember that being the one thing that I would expect at every single parent-teacher conference. And that stuck with me because I knew it to be a bad thing and that I was going to get in trouble, or my mom would say things like, I bet they're going to tell me that you're talking too much in class, and set it up like that. But there was truth in that. So being able to look at the things that other people are saying, if we are self-aware, then we're not going to be criticized, except for take it as a healthy reminder that we still have to work on this area, whatever that area is for you. And you will know because you will be triggered by that area. So another thing to look at is your values, and values are extremely important. I know for me, honesty, freedom, humility, those are all very important values for me. So when I don't see them happening, it puts me into a really weird position. And I try to avoid those at all possible costs. And I know for me that if I'm in a place where I am lacking freedom yet dependent upon something, then I will set aside my personal needs and my personal wants so that way I can obtain, let me put away my wants, because freedom is what I want, and set aside my needs, because set aside my wants and then focus on these needs, and therefore I'm not being true to myself anymore. And I need to figure out what that balance is so that way I can continue to move forward in a direction and recognize the red flags that are present prior to. So let's say if I had a job as a debt collector, and I knew that being in this environment was causing me a lot of issues, then I stayed because of the things that this job had to offer me. Then I put aside the fact that I am constantly in anxiety and stress over constantly having to call people and reminding them that they owe money as if they don't remember a million times a day, over and over and over for weeks and months on end, to the point where I probably have phone numbers memorized and I know I'm going to get sent to voicemail, or I know I'm going to get yelled at or cussed out, or my morals are going to be questioned. And, this time of year around Christmas or during COVID, all of those things. And then I end up finally leaving that job and I go get a job somewhere else. Well, after all of that workplace trauma, I have been shown a bunch of red flags. Oh yeah, let's say I also have a super toxic boss on top of that. And then all of my coworkers are like sheeple, right? People that are sheep. And they're all just going along with the flow. And we know that this doesn't feel right. It's a toxic environment. Things aren't going well. I'm constantly being yelled at. I'm not getting any money from these people because they don't have the money. And so therefore now my boss is yelling at me and I'm constantly in trouble, or I'm getting performance improvements and I'm not able to improve. And there's just all this toxicity that's wrapped around this job. And so I moved to a different job. Now I have the ability to be able to focus on the red flags that I was taught previously. And now this comes with investigation and the ability to recognize situations without them being the same. And that's where we are practicing discernment and being able to state, okay, I recognize this behavior. I recognize this level of toxicity. I recognize that these goals are actually unattainable. Therefore, I'm going to end up over here in this position and be able to detach from those things. So now I've quite gone off course from what we were originally talking about with these examples, but anytime I go off course, I know that somebody is going to hear this that needed that particular example. But okay, back to our original topic, which is being able to let go, detaching from validation, reframing criticism, understanding boundaries when we need to set them, challenging our fears. That's a huge one. When we are practicing self-awareness, we are also doing shadow work at the exact same time. Because in order for us to avoid, or okay, I'm sorry, not avoid, but to not be attached to negative outcomes from conversations or situations or jobs or relationships, we also have to identify our fears that are keeping us in the same loophole. And when we are able to look at the self-awareness and evaluate why certain things are triggering us to a specific level of anxiety, of depression, triggering our post-traumatic stress disorder, then we are going to find our fears of why we have not yet been able to overcome them. Now, when we begin this work and we start learning how to become self-aware and not being in denial, not making justifications, not choosing to validate other people's emotions before our own. When we start to do the work, we will be presented with opportunities to prove that we are now able to identify these situations. Now, that doesn't mean that our actions change overnight by any way, shape, or form. Very rarely, I would say, that you start to do the inner work and become self-aware. You start to recognize where you need to set boundaries, where you need to change the dialogue of what somebody else has said. And then you get presented with the opportunity. Very rarely are you going to instantly make that shift. No, we have to be able to recognize these areas. We have to be able to recognize the red flags. We have to be able to recognize when our triggers are going off. And so we will be resurfacing shortly, probably after, with another opportunity to identify and make a decision. And like what I was saying is that our decisions are not always going to be automatic into solution. Like, oh, I learned about this. I need to set a boundary here. Set the boundary. We're good to go. No, usually it's okay. I'm here in this particular conversation. I feel very uncomfortable. I should probably set a boundary. I need to set a boundary. How should I say this? How can what are the right words for this boundary? Oh gosh, they're still talking. Okay, I need to lay the boundary. I'm getting more and more uncomfortable. Okay, this is getting awkward. Okay, and then your response is, yeah, yeah, I know, I understand. And you didn't do anything. You didn't lay a boundary. You didn't do anything in action, but you recognized, okay, I'm starting to get uncomfortable. What does uncomfortable look like? Do you maybe stop talking? Do you go into your head? Does your heart start racing? Do you start sweating? Are you breathing differently? Those are all of your initial signs. So when you get presented with these opportunities to let go or set boundaries, you're going to have a physical reaction because these are your opportunities to start to make change. So I'm going to leave this here today at this particular moment in time. And I am so glad to have been able to connect with you and spend some time with you today. I feel very blessed for everyone who has come into my space. I have the utmost gratitude for the opportunity to be able to be here, to be able to speak and get whatever is on my mind out. And I appreciate you so much for listening. I love you.